Welcome to another edition of the Hawk Off the Press podcast. I'm your host, Gazette Hawkeyes reporter, John Steppe. I am joined by my good friend and the Athletics Iowa beat reporter, Scott Dochterman. Scott, thanks for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me on. I always enjoy the introduction when people say the athletic Scott Dochterman, and I'm like, yeah, I haven't been athletic now at least 30 years, but I appreciate you having me back on the formerly known as the On Iowa podcast.
Yes, some great times as the On Iowa podcast, but I don't know, maybe you could have a pretty good pickup game if there's a Hawkeye beat writer 5-on-5.
Basketball? Oh,
yeah.
God. Oh, hell. Oh, no, not that sport.
All right. I take that back then.
Yeah, maybe shooting pool. But I can fake my way through that after not playing very often anymore. There's maybe pop a shot. How about that? Not 5-on-5, but we'll go to an arcade.
You might be better than Caitlin Clark on the pop-a shot after that video.
Yeah, I still doubt that. I think your competitive juices will get past me on that.
Yeah, good point. Well, let's switch gears here to actually Iowa football, which I think people are probably a little more interested than your athletic pursuits. So now we're about 2/3 of the way through the spring season. It's kind of gone by fast. So let's first talk about the offense. I think the biggest question mark going into this has been around quarterbacks. Obviously, we haven't gotten a great solution to it, having seen 30-ish minutes of practice and then hearing from players here and there. And the only quarterback we heard from is Petras. It's clear Petras, though, does have a plan for how he wants to improve in 2022.
Well, he does. He's always been a very committed player, and he's always done so much off the field. And really, after being around almost all these quarterbacks, he's got as good of a mind for the game of football as anyone I've been around, and a great work ethic. And he's gone out to, New Jersey and worked on his fundamentals, he does so many different things to try to improve his game. And he's tough-minded, he's committed. It's just a matter of performance and execution for him. It's really what it comes down to, because he checks every other box you want. Now, as far as leadership, yes, he's there. He's all in. Toughness, he's proven he can do that too. Is he a winner? Well, they've won when he's been the quarterback, and just commitment. And does he love football? Absolutely. All of those things are really in his favor. It's just, it gets down to what happens on Saturdays, and executing on third down and passing and all those details are the most important things to people, because that's what they watch. They don't care what he does in practice. I've heard that from other sports too, where this guy makes all the shots in practice, but I don't get, he makes, 20% from three in the game. It doesn't really matter what he did in practice. And so I think that's right now, it's understandable why there's some frustration among the fan base that he may win it. I do think he can improve, though. And if he can go from, 56%, 57% completion percentage to 63%,
that makes a big difference.
That's a lot of third down passes that could go in his direction. And if he can do that, this team's going to be better. Now, is it going to be better? Is it going to be more entertaining? He's not going to run like, take your pick out any of your favorite
Lamar Jackson.
Yeah. I mean, you're not going to get a runner. Think Tom Brady, but he's got to complete those passes and get the ball out of his hands faster. So
a big difference between Tom Brady's completion percentage and Spencer Petras's completion percentage last year.
Yeah, there's a lot of other things too. So I think that, but I don't know, John. I mean, what do you think? I mean, do you think this is a legitimate quarterback competition, or do you think this is just one that, hey, we're calling it a competition, but it's skewed towards the incumbent?
I think it's easy to say competition. So, I think sometimes talk can be a little cheap there. But, the fact that even just kind of the way that they've operated, where, we've only talked to one quarterback, and that's Spencer Petras. When it was a little more open, maybe we'd hear from Padilla. So I think that's maybe a small little sign too. So I think it's maybe a little bit of I wouldn't put too much faith on it being the wide open thing that, Kirk Ferentz has said at times, Brian Ferentz has said. Yeah, I think the way that they've kind of been acting, it seems like at least like it's Petras's job to lose. And I think to Petras's credit, he's well positioned to improve.
Yeah.
So, he slimmed down. To your credit, you're just 1 pound off on guessing his weight when he asked. So
you should go to the circus for that one, right?
That could be your side gig.
Yeah, my side hustle is guessing people's weights. I'm sure that would go over well. But the thing is with Spencer, he wants to be good, and so you've got to give him the credit for that. And and I know people can go, oh yeah, well I want to be good too. Well, it's not the same thing. The wanting to be good means you're putting the effort into being good, and he's doing that. He spent his spring break at a quarterback trainer in New Jersey. It's not like he was on
with Nico Reganey too.
Right. It's not like he's in a beach in Daytona or down in South Padre Island or someplace like that. I mean, he really wants to get better because he knows this is an important season. Now, I do think it's a competition, but I think they've kind of wiped everything away, the equity away, and they're evaluating it on the day-to-day. And who's better at the day-to-day? Right now, it's Spencer Petras. If they had a game on Saturday, he's starting because he knows the offense and he can get everybody involved. Now, what Brian Ferentz said, and I kind of understand, is they're not at an equal level right now. I mean, no. Joey Labus does not know the offense like Spencer Petras. He probably won't, for that matter. But can he know it enough to where he can get everybody in and out and do everything he needs to do? So then they can evaluate it on, okay, completion percentage in practice and all the other factors that really matter. That's where it's going to be fascinating. I don't see this being a job won by May. I think it'll probably be Kids Day-ish in mid-August, maybe a little later than that, they'll kind of call it. And I don't think it's fair if they did it anyway, because to Alex Padilla, for instance, would he have come back if he didn't have at least an opportunity to compete for the job? Because his time is finite. If you don't win the job, years. Yeah, you don't win the job this spring or this summer, then you have one more year left. Now you have your COVID year, so there's a mulligan somewhat, but still, you want to make sure you maximize your opportunities. And if it's just a sham competition, then it isn't. Now, it's just, there are just so many different little things, such as, efficiencies. Here's a couple of things. They were pressured on 33% of their dropbacks. That is not a winning number by the offensive line. Now, they can do something about it a little bit, but not a lot. That is, and we saw it. They got pressured. And that ranked 79th in the country. The year before, it was only 24%. So Alaric Jackson made a big difference. So did Mark Kallenberg. And then there's, like Petras was, okay, as far as when he got rid of the ball at 2.5 seconds, completed about 64%. But then afterwards, it was 51%. So what it shows is when longer developing plays, he's less accurate. Is it because he's less decisive? Is it because he's inaccurate? Is it because there's too much pressure? Yes, to all of it. He's just got to be better.
And I think there are some factors at play that can help him too, because you get a little bit of a change with Ken O'Keefe retiring, Brian Ferentz coaching quarterbacks. And I think the piece of that, more so than what I just said of Brian Ferentz coaching quarterbacks, the addition of John Budmeyer, who seemed to be, at least in the part of practice that we saw, almost like the more technical quarterback coach, even though he has that analyst title officially. Maybe having him as an experienced quarterback maybe that helps a little bit too. So I think that's another thing that maybe is a little bit of a wild card in there, because with Petras, it seemed like there's almost two versions of him, the first half of the year and the second half of the year.
Yeah,
And if
but
you,
that was based on injury in a lot of cases. He was legitimately hurt a couple of times, and then the other part was they did play much better defenses.
oh yeah,
Iowa State even looked very good, but Iowa State did have a very good defense. But the second half of the season when he got hurt at Wisconsin, he didn't play. He played one series at Northwestern. He was out for Illinois and Minnesota in the first half at Nebraska, and then the only game where they looked the part was kind of in Kentucky, and even then he had opportunities and it didn't work out. So I do think when you look at this team, John, and I'm sure you are, is evaluating it. Their strengths are their defense. Their defense is going to win them games and keep them in games where they maybe have no business winning. Their special teams will add that layer that helps them. We saw it a lot last year. Can the offense put themselves in a position to win those games that they're, to be a winning football team? In 2020, they were, and it was really unfortunate for them. They had such a slow start because they were really good by the end of the year. But if the quarterback can complete 60%, if they can run the ball for 4.3 yards per carry, and that's not even really good numbers, those are just kind of baseline numbers, then I think, okay, they can control the line of scrimmage, they can run the football with effectiveness, and they can complete third down passes. And then especially in the red zone, that was a disaster last year. 4 touchdown passes in the red zone and 2 interceptions. Nate Stanley threw 47 touchdowns in the red zone and 1 interception. So they got to do better there.
And I think that 4th and 1 in the Purdue game probably still stings a little bit.
Yeah,
there are some missed opportunities there.
Yeah, the interceptions. I mean, they had a couple of strong kick returns, and then the sneaks, and then the fullback dives at Wisconsin. And what that told me at that point in the season was, when you go those plays back to back, is you don't trust your full offense. You don't trust your tackles, and you don't trust what your offense can do. You're just trying to squeeze the last drop of ketchup out of the bottle. And they weren't very good, and then because those were frankly winnable games. Now, the score didn't indicate that, but the opponents, based on the past, Iowa, even Iowa giving up 24 points over it against Purdue, so what? That happens. You got to score 31. They scored 24 the year before, and it didn't feel like some, mountain of issues. And then Wisconsin scored 27, but that was self-inflicted in a couple of those situations. So, but even then, if you have a decent offense, you can respond, you can score. I mean, keeping teams in the 20s across the board in college football is not a death sentence.
Oh yeah,
but at Iowa,
both of those games, the defense did enough.
Yeah, I mean, at Wisconsin, they have a goal line stand. And then the very next play, your running back drops the ball, doesn't even get it tucked in. And you can't do anything if you're a defense about that. I mean, you can't go and then, all right, we're going to have another goal line stand against that team. You know what you're going to get. And eventually they're going to, they pin and pull you right to death. And so that's, but anyway, I think getting back to what they can do and what Brian Ferentz can do is simplify it, streamline it. And then you've got to have the players execute. There is some truth to Brian Kirk or whatever talking about execution. Mm-hmm. Make the makeable plays. There were a lot of makeable plays they left on the field. And had they made some of those plays in the passing game, that would have helped them along. I think, the Kentucky game, that was winnable. They were the better team.
Oh, yeah.
And they found a way not to win.
Change any two things. And it's a much different game.
Right. You lose by, and what happens is that if you play that style of football, eventually your defense will give up a play. It just happens. It doesn't matter how good you are. It's just the way it is. And so when they relied, and they're again, 4th and inches, didn't trust your offense to win the game. You get that first down, you win the game. Instead, no, let's punt and put all the pressure on your defense. Well, they've got an NFL wide receiver in Wan'Dale Robinson. and he made a big play on a really good defensive back. And, that happens.
Yeah.
And so,
On the
and
Big
then
Ten
you
defensive
still have
back
the
of the
ball.
year.
Huh?
On the Big Ten defensive back of the year, no less.
Right. Yeah. And it happens. Those things happen. It's not, he's not going to be Deion Sanders out there. But I think what then the next step is, okay, well, they got one. We got the ball. We can go score. And instead throw an interception. That's the problem. And that's where they got to face. And that's where it comes down to quarterback. And it's not an impossible situation. I mean, I remember CJ Beathard was the type of guy who tipped the field a little bit. He was out there, he had a little bit of swagger, and he can make plays and he can run for first downs. The thing is, in Iowa's offense, if you cannot run the ball as a quarterback, then okay, that's fine, but you better complete 65% of your passes. And when you're completing 55% and you're throwing 10 interceptions to 12 touchdowns, you're putting way too much pressure on a great defense, and that was
a lot
of
of those passes weren't exactly Herculean throws that they were trying. There were a lot of missed short passes that really should be high percentage. And I think the common kind of defense against using completion percentage is obviously deeper throws, lower completion percentage, but it wasn't exactly like they were really stretching the field there. Keegan Johnson, true freshman, had as many 40-plus yard catches as all the other receivers combined, or as all the other wide receivers, I should clarify, combined. So, that's the other thing, too, is when you're looking at it schematically, it really, as you were saying, those low 60s, I think that's the difference. And I think another key thing is the offensive line. I think when going out of the Citrus Bowl, I thought pretty highly of this offensive line. I was thinking, okay, Linderbaum's gone. We've got some other pieces. But it's going to be tough, too, when you lose another guy like Cody Ince, who, really has been an established guy that's played a lot of games.
Yeah, he was. Unfortunately, he's just too banged up. His body's in bad shape, and you don't want to cut yourself short. You want to at least give yourself an opportunity. He couldn't, and it's really too bad, because I thought he was all Big Ten capable, or at least get to the next level capable. It's in some way. So yeah, you got to kind of go back to square one. And the thing was, I thought that they were much better against Kentucky running the football, that they were able to kind of do more of what they wanted to do. And like Tyler Goodson is a terrific running back, but I think, he was better served when there was a little bit more space, outside zone, which was 2020, I should say, with Alaric Jackson out there. He got such great push on the edge that there were lanes, and then he could, his cutback ability was really solid. But the problem was last year, a lot of times the holes weren't there, and he tried to make something out of nothing, but there were a lot of missed opportunities, to get even 1 yard, to get 0 yards. Instead, he got a lot of, -2 and 3 yards. And when you're second and 13 in this offense with this passing game, forget it. I mean, you might as well just punt at that point. But, so I think what they did was they simplified it a little bit more. You saw more of a consistent and confident push out of the offensive line. They ran a lot of inside zone, because you had the best center in the country, but also you had other players around him that really looked the part. And I don't think they want to just run all inside zone next year. You might as well.
I think their strengths are a lot different now on that line.
So you have two really good running backs. I really liked the way they ran. I think they worked better with what they had, which is still growing. Now going forward, it's going to take some time for this to gel. It might take 6 to 8 games for it to gel. This is not something you think from day one, oh wow, this is going to be reclamation of the 2002 Iowa offensive line, or even 2018 or whatever. But I think they've got some potential. I like Connor Colby. I think is going to be outstanding. I think Mason Richmond's really got some upside too. I want to see.
I think Colby could be all Big Ten conversation
by the end of the year.
Yeah, I think so.
Really? We'll see. I mean,
that might be a little
bold
on my part, but
yeah, I'm not ruling it out. But I think he's on that track. I don't know if this is the year for that, but maybe. I don't know. I'm not gonna give him a ceiling. But Mason Richmond, I thought was really good at times last year. I thought at other times he really struggled. Jack Plum had some ups and downs, but Iowa tends to have a senior that kind of steps up and it becomes that great story on the offensive line. It happens almost every year. I mean, Kyler Schott was kind of that way last year. And in the past, you've had, Keegan Render and Ross Reynolds and just players that come out and all of a sudden they're second team all Big Ten. You're like, wow, okay, I guess it wasn't so bad. But really what's important is how are the younger players going to respond? Can a David Davidkoff or a Bo Stevens or
a Logan Jones he's moved over to the offense.
Tyler Ellsbury, how do they respond? Josh Volk, from Cedar Rapids Xavier, can they make that push? Can they become, push everybody to the point where, hey, we got to play this guy. He's too good. It's too good to sit. We're going to at least have to rotate him and nothing else. Nick DeYoung, can he take that step? That's really why I thought going into the spring that it's obviously a crucial spring, but I think it's also a joy for the coaching staff because it's stripping it all down and saying everybody's got a shot here. There's no Linderbaums, unfortunately, but there's no Tristan Wirfs, but there's enough guys here that when we think that, you're going to determine your own path, your own destiny, by how you do it in the weight room for 2 months, and then what you do, in spring football for a month, and then, kind of take it from there. And I think they've got the guts of a really good unit. I just don't know that it'll reach a high level, if you will, until, maybe it gets to November and they'll churn it out. I mean, I'm dating myself here a little bit, but in 2008, they looked not very good, to be honest with you, for the first month-ish of the season. They looked a little, and they had a kind of similar template. They had a very young quarterback in Ricky Stanzi, who was really inconsistent at the time. They had a lot of linemen, and they had some injuries, and they were young and they're growing. But you had a Brian Bulaga, who's a true sophomore, and Rob Bruggeman had come off a knee injury, but was, when he's healthy, he's great. Julian Vandervelde. I mean, so they had some good pieces. By November, they gelled to the point where they were the most physical, badass offensive line in the Big Ten. And they had Sean Green, who was able just to, run for 6 yards a carry and blow people up and have great balance, and was the best running back in the country that year. So, I'm not suggesting they're going to be that, but I think the offensive line is capable of that type of performance. It's just not going to come.
They have at 4 out of the 5 positions, they're going to have somebody who's played significant time at that position, because you've got, obviously center is the exception, because when was Linderbaum off the field? Very, very rarely. But, you have Colby and Britt both at guard. You've got Plum, you've got Richmond, and then you've got DeYoung too.
Yeah.
So
I'd really like to see Britt take that step forward. I mean, he has never really had a great, he's been an injury prone because he tore his ACL in high school, and he was played too early as a true freshman. And I think it would be a great story, if he can step in, be healthy. He might be the Logan Lee of the offensive line, if that can happen. Because Logan Lee was kind of in the same boat on defense, where it's just constantly injured. Is this guy even going to play? And then all of a sudden, boom, he has a really solid sophomore season, where by the end of the season, he was one of the better defensive linemen in the Big Ten, I think.
Oh yeah, and he shows up now as a leader. on a defensive line. I think this is a great way to switch gears here to the defense. When I look at that defensive line, that's loaded with experience. When you've got a guy like Lucas Van Ness, who's second team after what he did, and he still has a lot of development time before the start of the 2022 season. When you look at what he did in 2021, I think that speaks volumes as to the state of the defensive line. Granted, that first two deep, take it for what it's worth, a lot will change. So, he could end up being a first team, but, that I think speaks a lot to the depth at this area.
Yeah, I kind of think he's going to end up starting. I think he's too
I could
valuable.
see him as a starting end too.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. I think he'll be the starting right end. If I was, maybe I'm wrong, but I do think that's his position. He has some really good skills as a pass rusher. He's got length and quickness and burst and power. He can shift the acceleration, the power, which is what you really want on the edge. And he has training and being in the mosh pit, and he had 7 sacks as a defensive tackle. As backup.
Which you don't hear very often.
That's pretty tough to do. I mean, and going against a lot of big guards and stuff, but I mean, he really could do a nice job there. And so I think what'll probably happen, I know Joe Evans has kind of been in and out for this spring or whatever, and I would guess that he would still probably be that designated pass rusher, and maybe Lucas Van Ness goes inside on third down. They kind of ran that NASCAR package now for 3 to 4 years, and it's been really effective. Where some of their exterior, their edge guys go inside, and then they run basically 4 defensive ends and push the quarterback on passing downs. And I think that's probably where you're set. But I mean, the interesting thing is you've got a lot of solid guys on the offensive line or defensive line that are starting. But the talent is on the second team. So like John Wagner is kind of your tough guy. Mm-hmm. He's not going to get a lot of stats, but he does what he needs to do. Maybe this year is the year he gets those. Noah Shannon is, really a dependable guy, technically sound, does all the things you need him to do, and is really overachieves in some ways based on his size, but he does a really nice job. And, Logan Lee, I think, is at a different level, but, Joe Evans, kind of the same deal as Logan. But then you look at the second team, Y.A. Black, when his fundamentals catch up with his body and everything, he's going to be a hellion.
And I think we saw flashes of him too last year.
I mean, he's got the starter kit of a kid that can walk out there and just dominate. Because he's bigger than Davion Nixon, and whether he's that proficient, that's hard to say. But I mean, he's just, they've had a handful of defensive tackles like that. He fits that profile. And Lucas Van Ness is, a burst off the edge. And I like Keontae Craig too. And wait for Aaron Graves. This is the first time I walked into a high school and I went and visited him. I've visited AJ Epineza and all these other guys in high school. This is the first time I went, holy bleep, when I walked in. And I saw him. I'm like, this kid does not look like a 17, 18-year-old kid. He looks like he's 23, 24. He just looks like, Tarzan, like, Kelvin Bell said. It's true. Yeah. And so my anticipation is he plays someone. He's just too good. His film is too good. And so
maybe it takes him a couple games to kind of find his way into the rotation. Mm-hmm. But, I haven't seen him in person personally, but everything I'm hearing, you usually don't hear a coaching staff rave as much about a true freshman as they've been raving about Graves. So
most of the kids that you see at Iowa and defensive line are kind of come in that 240, 250 range where they're big kids, of course, but then it takes them a year or 2 or 3 to kind of bulk up to, you look at Logan Lee and John Wagner now, they're like behemoths. They weren't that way. In. I mean, mm-hmm. Logan Lee was going to play tight end. But you look at Aaron Graves and you're like, okay, this is different. This is body-wise, I'm not comparing anything else. J.J. Watt body-wise. when he was at Wisconsin. And so you're just like, oh. So and then Aaron, even Herkett is a good player, tough player, and he's
Yeah.
going to find a role when he gets in there too. I mean, he's going to. So I mean, they can go 8-9 deep, and they have different levels of talent and experience and toughness. And when you're playing a Wisconsin, yes, that's when you want John Wagner and you want Noah Shannon and you want Logan Lee being in there as much as you can, because they know that the pulling guard's coming their way and they're going to get ear-holed if they don't watch for it. But then there's going to be some passing teams that, when you're playing Ohio State, you're going to want the best from Deontay Craig and Lucas Van Ness and Y.A. Black and Aaron Graves and on and on. So I'm bullish on this unit. I think they could, I'm skeptical. Maybe that sounds wrong, but I'm not sure the offensive line will get there quick enough. The defensive line, I have no qualms. It's gonna be there, and it's gonna be fun to watch.
Well, because you look at it, and last year was kind of supposed to be, it's kind of almost a cliche term, but almost the rebuilding year for the defensive line. And you look at the results, and they produce. So when you have a guy like Van Ness who did what he did, I think that probably took people, at least I'd say fans, inside the building is obviously a different story, but I think it took a lot of fans by surprise to see him producing as early as he did and seeing some of those other people produce as early. And you lose Van Valkenburg, but then you have other people coming in, you have other people getting more time. Steck is another person to maybe keep an eye on. So, they've got some options there. And obviously, it's easy to be optimistic about some positions. And then come fall, they get hit by the injury bug. This might be, I hate to say injury proof, but the most, you could lose a guy or two to some injuries and still be in pretty good shape.
Yeah. I don't want to utter those words because that always seems to bite people. And I encourage anybody who gets mad if it's you who said that, not me. But they have enough depth to withstand an injury. And I will say that. And and some of the things I like is hearing about it. Jeremiah Pittman, who's a 300-pound defensive tackle, if he can enter the rotation, if you can get him 10 snaps a game. I mean, if you can keep these guys to 30 snaps on average, they're going to be so effective in the fourth quarter. And Iowa typically plays some really close games against some good teams. And so, in the fourth quarter, when Michigan comes to Kinnick Stadium and it's close and you're rotating guys because, hey, Jeremiah Pittman got in there and he had 1 tackle in 12 plays. But, hey, in the fourth quarter, we've got Lucas Van Ness in there, pressuring Caden McNamara. Here, he'll take it. Mm-hmm. And so, I think their front seven could be a real strength this year because I think the linebacking core could be as good as any in the country.
Oh, yeah. Well, you have everyone coming back, essentially.
I mean, you have Jack Campbell led the country in tackles. He's like the Marvel Man out there. And, because he's, 6'5", 245 rangy, can tip, can hit, can cover, can power,
kind of a magnet to the ball too.
Yeah. Pick 6, fumble recovery for a touchdown, forced a fumble at the goal line that turned into a touchback, just did all those things. And, he kind of tips the field a little bit. And then Justin Jacobs has incredible athletic ability. Can help their defense to the point where, Ben Neiman was a pretty good Leo backer who could play slot. Before him, Christian Kirksey could too, but even the league has changed over the last 7-8 years. So he can still play a lot of those cash roles as a 4-3. So you can put him over the walkway and you got a slot there. And as long as you're not really playing man, you're okay. Yeah. Tight end is there. He's fine. He can cover tight end. There's no tight end in the league he can't cover. Except maybe the one on the other on the other offense, Sam Laporta.
Yeah.
And so, and then Seth Benson always gets overlooked, but he's the prototype for what Iowa does. Take a 2-star from nowhere, Sioux Falls, but who's going to go to South Dakota State, walks in, works hard, and all of a sudden busts his ass, and now he's the type of guy. I mean, he's one of the more thunderous hitters in the Big Ten.
Oh yeah.
And
if they didn't have Jack Campbell, I feel like we'd be talking about Seth Benson a whole lot more.
Yeah.
And with Justin Jacobs, I think if Dean Belton wasn't on last year's team and such a solid option on the cash, maybe we'd see Justin Jacobs a little more. Well, I don't think there's any maybe about it. I think we really would have.
Yeah, that's true. And so, this year, usually they run about 75% cash. I think that number is going to drop. I mean, when you have a Justin Jacobs and your cash back or your whatever guy is going to be not as good, you want to get your best 11 on the field, especially against some great competition. Now, when you're playing Ohio State and Jackson Enigma Smith is in the slot, you do not want to have Justin Jacobs there. Unless you are he's playing the flat zone. That's it. But then again, I don't know if you want anybody else there either. He's Odell Beckham. But, the fact is that he can play a lot of snaps, and I think that could be helpful. And then, kind of what Seth Wallace said last week, which I found very informative, is now because they have a veteran linebacking core, they can mix and match where they could say, all right, this possession, because Minnesota, Illinois, specifically those two, but also Wisconsin, they're going 2 tight end. They're motioning one. So they got a 2 tight end formation to the boundary side. Let's get our kick-ass linebacker over there over the top, playing Leo, and so he can take on the edge, as opposed to, no offense to Justin Jacobs, but he might get hit and buried a little bit by kind of in the wash.
Oh, yeah.
It's just and one play difference, but one play can win or lose you a game too.
Yeah, that's a great point there, and it gives you some more options, and I think it'd be good to also have a little more of that flexibility, because you probably don't want to play Jack Campbell quite as many snaps as he played this year, where workload wise, that's a lot. And he is the eager guy who wants to be out there for all of that. But you're going to run into some issues if you're relying on people year in, year out to be well into those 900s in terms of numbers of snaps.
Yeah.
I think it's actually only 900s if you're looking at defense only, let alone special teams. I believe is 1,100 something for Campbell last year.
Yeah, you don't want him in the special. I mean, really, maybe one of the special teams units, but I would say punt return, just because it's defensive related. But you don't want him on punt. You've got to be careful there. Which games can you do that with? And you can't announce when you're going to do it, because, let's take the opener. I mean, South Dakota State, that's not an FCS opponent that you look at and go, okay, we're buried. I mean, they are a really good FCS. I mean, they're the type of team that if they were in the MAC, they would go to a bowl game most years. And they're probably the little brother to North Dakota State, but, they're still very, very good. I'm not saying Iowa can't win by 2 touchdowns or more, but you can't say, all right, hopefully by the third quarter we get Jack Campbell out. It's more like, okay, if we get an opportunity, do it. Because I think that's the thing, having Jay Higgins is really going to be a blessing, because he had like 500 tackles the senior year in Indiana. It was just a gross number. But you put him, in the middle, and you can have Seth Benson in there flanking him. Or you can say, all right, we're going to run cash this series, and you can have Justin Jacobs play well alongside Seth Benson or something. You could mix and match to limit it. There are games where you're going to want to taper him off, but he's also so damn good, you don't want to take him off the field if you can.
Yeah.
Just
but I think even if you cut 100 snaps over the course of the season, that would make a difference in terms of wear and tear for him.
The problem is Yes, you want to do that ideally, but you know who needs to help do that? The offense. It
Yes.
can't. I can't let Minnesota have the ball for 40 minutes.
Yeah.
That's how you cut snaps. And if the offense scores more points, even in games against like Illinois, that way he doesn't have to be on the field to intercept that pass to score a touchdown. And
Oh
somebody
yeah.
else, or against a team like that, or take your pick. Northwestern, that game was way too close.
Oh yeah. Should
That's
not
just
have been a 17-12 game.
right. That should be a 31-6 game, and so in fourth quarter, hey, Jay Higgins, you go out there and do this. No, you piddled around too much on offense.
Yeah.
So, but and then the secondary is going to be fascinating to watch because there's
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of different people involved, and the ones who seem to be the starting calibers. I mean, Riley Moss is going to start, no question.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like Quinn Schulte at free safety and Kayvon Merriweather at strong, and Cash looks like it's up in the air between Castro and Cooper DeJean, and then finally you look at corner.
Terry Roberts.
I mean, Roberts and Jamari Harris played really well. So, but Jamari Harris isn't practicing in the spring, so we'll see. I mean, it could be a really interesting competition there. So,
Yeah.
and then you throw on Xavier Nwapa and TJ Hall stirring some heads.
Yeah, we've been hearing about TJ Hall a couple times now this spring in press conferences and everything. So it's clear he's opening some eyes there. And when you have a 5-star recruit, that's always a nice luxury to have, especially at a school like Iowa where that doesn't happen every day. And I could see a couple different ways that Wampa fits into the picture there. So
I doubt he's a starter. I really don't think he'll get there this year. I think he will be next year. I think, my guess is he probably backs up Kayvon Merriweather. And
I think he could be maybe even playing a little bit of both free and strong and kind of be that top reserve potentially.
Yeah, I don't even know. I mean, because since Iowa plays kind of too deep, that there's not a real decisive difference between strong and free the way there is for a lot of other teams that do it, because they just play that or half defense. So yeah, it's pretty interchangeable for the most part. It's just who calls the signals, but I do think he's probably going to fit in kind of that template. And then Quinn Schulte's there. Where does Cooper DeJean end up playing? That's going to be the question, because he's too good of an athlete to sit. I think him and Wampa, if they're the free and the strong at some point.
That's not a pleasant thought for opposing offensive coordinators there. So it's interesting because on paper, you look at the secondary and it's a group that lost 3 starters, 3 that were really good players. You look at it with Hankins, granted, he was hurt for the later parts of the year. So it's almost like they already kind of have gotten accustomed to that loss. But then Jack Kerner, who, is going to have a pretty good shot at, I think he's going to get a training camp spot on an NFL team. And then you have Dane Belton, who I think helped his case a little bit at the combine. And I think it's realistic to expect to hear his name, especially day 3. I think it's very realistic to hear him get his name called. So that 4.43 40 certainly doesn't hurt. And the ability to play in sub packages and having that linebacker-ish experience, I think is also really helpful for Belton. So you lose all those people and you're still looking at a pretty good group here.
Yeah, I mean, they still haven't. Bringing back Riley Moss changes the dynamic. If he wasn't there, then you're going, okay, they've got some holes to fill, because you've really got to count on a minimum 3 corners. Last year they had to go 4 deep. When Moss got hurt for a while, and then Roberts got hurt, and then Hankins got hurt, and so that by the end of the Citrus Bowl, you had Cooper DeJean out. I mean, because Harris got hurt. So you've got to look to 3 to 4 corners, and and then there are guys right now who are battling for their lives at Iowa, frankly. Guys like Brennan Diaz-Fernandez and AJ Lawson, If they fall behind anymore, if you get a TJ Hall who leaps over him, you've already had a machine who leaps over him, then you've got to start to evaluate your position in the team and what's important. But they do have enough, Kerner's going to be tough to replace, but not impossible to replace. Kind of like Jake Gervais was before him, a really good player, did a lot of good things, but, that's why you have good depth and you can step in and I, as good as Kerner is and was in so many different areas, Cooper DeJean, if he takes that role, or, Quinn Schulte has to do that too. So there's some value back there. And then I'm anxious to see what the newcomers come in the summer and how they perform. And, but I think they've got 8, 9, 10 guys that I think have the potential to play this year.
And then special teams will be interesting. Obviously, no real surprises when you have Tory Taylor coming back. You kind of know what you're going to get there with the former Big Ten punter of the year. But then kicker is a competition. We talked a lot this week's press conference with LeVar Woods about Holder. So for me as a special teams nerd, that was an entertaining press conference there. So Cooper DeJean maybe also is the Holder, maybe, possibly. That might be a little wishful thinking there, but if you have him there, that would add a wild factor there. I think Tory Taylor is a little more likely, but, it's something interesting to ponder for the next few months.
I got to hand it to LeVar because he planted that seed, and I know, I know what the message boards are going to be like for this. I know what people are thinking, and he, and like he said, eventually I think he caught up to it. And he's like, well, the most important thing is catch it and let somebody kick field goals, and because maybe they'll have 1 or 2 fakes throughout the year. It was, I think, 2017 they had like 4 or 5, but yeah, I mean, it does present that opportunity and that possibility, and that's really fun to consider. And wow, you have Cooper DeJean out there, who a former high school quarterback, so he can throw, a great athlete with the ball in his hands. He can do something with it. But I guess this is the seed that a lot of fans are getting now during this time of year to go, oh wow, look at them, and then they're going to be so bummed when it's Tory Taylor. I mean, they're just going to be miserable because of that. But still, for the next few months they'll be thinking of that. And if I'm LeVar, I'll even play to it where in open practice I'll let him catch it and then run around with it for a minute, just but really the most important factor by far and away. I mean, as you said, you have Charlie Jones back, Big Ten returner of the year. You have Tory Taylor, who 2 years ago was the Big Ten punter of the year. So you've got, the coverage units are outstanding, and they have
Terry Roberts back as gunner.
You have those guys. It's just going to be great. The question is going to be kicker, and Iowa needs a good kicker. And we saw it in 2019 with Keith Duncan. He kicked 29 field goals. He set the Big Ten record, and I think Iowa's had 6 games where they have 4 field goals. They need those. The offense isn't good enough to expect to get 31 points and 4 of which are touchdown related. I mean, they're just, so you're going to need that. And there is no way you can replicate it for an inexperienced kicker to think I'm kicking at the big house or even Kinnick Stadium, but certainly, I mean, they go to Ohio State for the first time in a century. And, if it's Drew Stevens, if it's Lucas Amaya, if it's Aaron Blum, I mean, what if it's 24-24 like it was in 2009 when it was a de facto Big Ten championship game and you miss a 22-yard field goal? That doesn't work very well. And so you cannot replicate that until you actually do it. And so that's like, I had that conversation with LeVar last year about Caleb, and he was talking Caleb up, and I'm like, how do you know? Well, we just believe, and then they come out and do it. But
I'd say a lot of success. Okay for Caleb.
Out great for Caleb. It worked out great for Keith Duncan, and it worked out great for Miguel Racinos and even Marshall Kane, who missed 6 extra points, but man, he could kick the 57-yarder to win it once. So they have all those pieces, and it's just a matter of can they do Can they execute it when they need to, in the rain and the wind, like Duncan did, or I don't know. But Iowa plays a lot of close games, so you're going to need that guy to come through, no matter how the wind is howling or the fans are bitching and what have you.
And I think it'll be interesting too. LeVar was saying about how he'd like to have a second punt returner as well. So it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, Charlie Jones is the first spot locked up. So, might as well put a master lock on that one. But, it'll be interesting to see who maybe emerges as that other punt returner.
Well, you need somebody, because last year he got poked in the eye on a kickoff, and he put, I'm not even going to say his name. I don't want to get anybody mad, but you put him in, who was the backup punt returner, and he drops the punt at Camp Randall Stadium. They take the ball up over at the 18-yard line.
Yeah.
You can't have that.
No.
He called for a fair catch and drops it. You just can't have that. And so, pretty much Cooper DeJean is going to play every position on the team, and you might as well make him a backup punt returner too. And,
if he's already, gunner, possibly holder with an asterisk on that one, possibly cash, possibly safety, just have him play every snap.
Make him the Wildcat quarterback while we're at it.
Yeah, might as well.
Oh, you want to see Hawkeye Twitter blow up.
Yeah, this'll make the rounds there. So yeah, but it'll be an interesting team, and they need to take a step up. When you look at that schedule, you've got some tough ones at Ohio State, even at home against Michigan, where I look at the crossover games when you draw at Rutgers, which granted Rutgers is Rutgers, but still on the road. So you've got that. You've got then at Ohio State versus Michigan is your three crossovers. Granted, we thought that the crossovers would be tough last year when it was Indiana, Maryland, and Penn State, and then all three kind of bottomed out. But I feel like it's a pretty safe bet to say that Michigan or Ohio State will be in that upper echelon of college football and likely in the conversation come December, or at least I should say November. Mm-hmm. So, it's a little harder to come up with a 10-win season. You could be a lot better team this year than last year and not win 10 games like they did last year.
Without a doubt. This is comparable to what we saw in 2019, which they were as good as anybody in the West. They basically lost their showdown game with Wisconsin 24-22 at Camp Randall. But they also played Michigan, and they lost by a field goal or by a touchdown, 10-3. And it was a slugfest, 10-3. They lost to Penn State 17-12 at home. So that's the same type of schedule you're dealing with here. Rutgers is not the same Rutgers team that we saw back then. They've got a different mindset. So if nothing else, you're going to be in a fist fight when you play them. You might win. I shouldn't, but it might be 24-10 and not 30-0. Get into reserves in the fourth quarter like it was last time. Except they had an incredible punter, Adam Corson. But
Punting will truly be winning in that game.
Yeah. The Michigan game is one where Michigan hasn't beaten Iowa in Iowa City since 2004, and that was in 2005, I'm sorry, and that was in overtime. Michigan draws out the best of Iowa in Iowa City. It always has. I would expect it to be a freaking insane game, atmosphere-wise. It's hard to say when it'll be kicked off. Fans seem to think, they look at that, that's going to be at night. Well, that's not the way it works anymore. Fox wants to promote its noon kickoff, big noon Eastern time kickoff as the main game. So it might be there, but I have to look at the other teams or the schedule for the other conferences before I make an accurate projection. But Michigan walks in that door, they are going to be the enemy after what happened last year. So they will get the best out of Iowa fan. And so that could be a very close game. I think it will be a close game.
That could be bring your earplugs, because it could get that loud kind of game.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it'd be like Penn State. Mm-hmm. Wisconsin comes to town. You know what you're going to get there. Iowa State comes to town. You know what you're going to get there. got to go to Minnesota, and Minnesota's starchy. They're pretty good, and Nebraska is you never know. Is this finally going to be the year? I don't know. But Northwestern.
And we've been saying, is this finally going to be their year for a couple of years now?
You never know. I mean, I think they lost a lot of pieces, but they played Iowa tough last 3 years. Northwestern is coming to Iowa City, but they've beaten Iowa the last 3 times in Iowa City. Now they had different personnel in those games.
But even when you look at a really down Northwestern team in 2021, they still, had that one close, as we were talking about earlier. So,
well, in 2020, the game that decided the West Division, they were down 17-0 in the second quarter. And now, if the fans were there, the outcome might have been different. They won 21-20, though. They came to Kinnick against a really good Iowa team that was really starting to turn the corner, fell down 17-0 right out of the gate, and still won with really not much of an offense. And now, granted, it was on the offensive coordinator, but you can do some different things than they did in that game and squeeze out a 23-21 win instead of lose by 1. Still, Pat Fitzgerald will have his team ready to play Iowa each and every time, and they will play hard. They may not play well, but they'll play hard. And so I think that's but all those games are tough. And going to Purdue, that has not been easy for Iowa to play Purdue under Jeff Brom. Illinois, you're going to get a better effort. They're just going to be physical, and there's a lot there. Minnesota hates.
And they could actually have their head coach available for that one.
Yeah. Beals will like to be there. Minnesota, like the chant says, who hates Iowa? We hate Iowa. You're going to the Twin Cities. So it's not going to be an easy schedule. I do think Iowa is prepared for it, defensively especially. Offensively, they got to catch up, because they could, as you said, they could be a better team, but be 7-5 because you lose a lot of close games. You lose to Ohio State decisively, and then you lose to take your pick out of all your favorite rivals, and you lose by a field goal to 3 of them because your kicker can't kick. That's a difference. Going back to Indianapolis and going to the Duke's Mayo Bowl, in late December.
Yeah, so we could see the one highlight of that would be Iowa fans getting to see potentially the Mayo bath of Kirk Ferentz. So,
yeah, I think we'll pass. If we have to, we will. But I don't know that would be the destination most Iowa fans want to go to. Is see, the most mayonnaise coach getting covered in mayonnaise. That'll be the narrative nationally. So.
And then spring practice coming up the week after Easter. The kind of big things I'm going to be looking at: quarterback, offensive line.
Yeah, I'm going to look at rotations, on defense especially, but also offensive line in particular. Everybody's eyes are going to be on the quarterback, and it's going to get – I don't think there'll be any over-analysis in Hawkeye land.
Oh, never. Ever.
But I do think that the way the offensive line competes against the defensive line will tell me a lot. I mean, if they're not going to win a lot of plays, they just don't. And that's been really good offensive lines have lost a lot of really good plays against good defensive lines. But how they compete will tell me a lot. Can they get some push once in a while? Can the running backs get some room once in a while? They were really, really pissed, the defense was, because last year at Kids Day, the offense actually played well. One coach told me that's the first time that happened all year. It's been a bloodbath the other times, but today, so they were pissed off. So, by the end, it was, they looked pretty good. Offense, of course, did not. So, we're going to chart all the plays of the quarterbacks, see how everything goes, and I'm anxious to find out, and I'm anxious to overreact like everybody else.
Yeah, and then we'll be brought back to reality in a couple months later.
We'll see. That's why they play the games.
And then Linderbaum had his own pro day today, or not today, this week, on Monday. And, I think he did enough there. Obviously, it would have been nice for him if he was able to participate in either the combine drills or the team pro day, but holding his own individual pro day. I haven't heard a number as to how many scouts were there, but I'm sure with a first round talent, He probably drew a handful at least. So yeah, I think he did enough there.
No, he's over 300 pounds and he ran a sub 540. That's really about it. All I needed to do. The film's there. He's done enough. He's as good as any center in the game, and that includes the NFL when it comes to zone blocking. If you're running a wide zone offense, you need, he's the type of center because he can get out. He can reach block a 3 technique. Nobody else can really do that. He can go out to get to the second level because he's so quick and agile and destructive when he gets there. Center is not considered a priority position. That's kind of hurts him a little bit. And that's why you don't see a lot of mocks with centers. They just, it's like, it's not sexy enough or whatever. But when you got a good one, you want to keep him. And I think, and maybe one of his problems is there's been a lot of really good centers that come in the second round late. And, like Creed Humphrey and what have you. But I think he's a late first rounder. I think he's probably somewhere either Green Bay to Cincinnati. If he gets in the late 20s, it wouldn't shock me at all if like Cleveland came up for him or Chicago came up for him, because those are teams that could use a center like him. And so if he's available at 27, 28, somewhere around there, I could see a team coming up and getting him. So I think
he's a lot of value for him at 27 or 28 because that's a player that you kind of know what you're going to get with him to a large extent. Well, barring injuries, you know what you're going to get with him.
Yeah, and those are unpredictable. So that's kind of like the asterisk or the qualifier you always throw out there.
Yeah.
Injuries aside, because football's full of them. But if he's healthy, he's a plug and play for 10 plus years guy for somebody and play at a high level. I think he's a Pro Bowl guy in year 1 or 2. Not being hyperbolic. I just think he's that good.
Oh yeah, no.
And so I think in some ways, and he may not get picked by a team in their current spot. I could see like there's going to be so much movement this year. I could see New Orleans, for instance, coming up to 7 where the Giants sit. And so the Giants will be at 16 and the Giants will be like, they need a center. Yeah. Maybe that's where they pick him. Or the Jets move down. They pick him, somewhere in the teens. Or if he kind of floats around and, somebody, Green Bay would be smart to grab him. He met with the Packers in Indianapolis. So, it's just, that there is a lot of different possibilities. I think it's just a matter of, just hold on. It's like riding a wild Mustang, don't get too high or too low because, I've had a couple players tell me, Marvin McNutt specifically called the draft the best, worst day of my life because you're spending all, and his was a Saturday, but you're just dying every minute until that call comes and voila, and it's the best moment of your life. And it's just,
and with Linderbaum, especially, granted, he is such a grounded guy. So if there's anybody to have to deal with this, you'd pick him based on how grounded he is. But, I could see it. He's kind of a unique case where I wouldn't be shocked if he went 14. I wouldn't be shocked if he went 29.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty wide range there. And, if he goes 14, you can point to A, B, and C. And if he goes 29, you can point to X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And that makes it, I think, a little more interesting for him.
And if he falls out of the first round, which sometimes things snowball and people don't notice. I've been at a draft. It's sometimes things get away from you and everybody kind of regathers themselves and recoups. And then they go, holy bleep, this guy's still around. Then 33 is when he's going to go, 33 to 34, in the next day. So, he's going to go very, very quickly. It's just, but I think he's going to be first round. I do think somebody will come up and get him if he's falling, to 28, 29. I would be surprised if Green Bay let him go with 2 picks in the 20s. The other I think 2 other guys get drafted for sure. And I think Belton's probably about a 5th round guy, maybe anywhere from late 4th to early 6th with him. Goodson, probably more 6th to 7th round. Running backs are just not valued as much. You look at Linderbaum, and it's kind of the same situation with Brees Hall. First round talent, but for not necessarily first round priority. And then finally, I think Van Valkenburg and Kerner have an outside shot late, because sometimes it just depends on, do you like the guy or not? If you have a lot of picks in the 7th round, do you feel like you want him? I mean, there's a lot of factors there.
Yeah. So, it's a little more unpredictable when you get to some of those later rounds. And I think Goodson helped his case with the combine. Really.
Yeah, he did. And that's important, because that's kind of the difference between him and, let's say, Akram Wadley a few years ago. Akram did not have a very good time at all. And that's the difference between getting drafted and not, is if you're a smallish running back. And I mean, Goodson does all the right things, weight-wise and stuff, but he's still 5'9", less than 200. You better run fast. And he did. So he's a good, character guy. So I think he can go. It's just, it might be a grueling day for him. I think it could happen in the 4th round, or it could happen in the 7th, but my guess is somewhere around the 6th.
Yeah. And I could see a situation where maybe 4 or 5 with those combine numbers, but it didn't help him that, the tape didn't always look so great this year. And a lot of that was the offensive line being so young. But you look statistically at his yards per carry in September, October, and that's not what you'd expect of an NFL running back. And out of circumstances largely beyond his control, but I don't think that helps him.
No, there are a lot of issues there, and he's had to go through them. He's had to sit there and watch tape. What happened here? You explain it. Okay, the tackle didn't get any push on the edge, didn't set the edge. There were no cutback lanes. Why did you then dance with 3 steps and juke and then get tackled for a 2-yard loss instead of sticking your neck in there and going? Those are things he's going to have to answer. But he's also a very dynamic running back who does a lot of really good things. So my guess is, like with any player in those positions over the final 100 picks, it's about who likes you, who maybe brought you to their facility, who had the conversation, who saw you on film and says, yeah, he could be our number 3 running back and do a couple of things for us, and he fits this role. And then there are other, salary cap issues to personnel issues. How much have you spent here? Are you rebuilding? Are you not? Do you have 15 picks, or are you 3? Just stuff like that. So, yeah, it should be fun.
Yeah. Well, Scott, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
And thanks to our listeners for tuning into another episode of the Hawk Off the Press podcast. I'll be back with another episode next week. Until then, we will talk Hawks later.